Welcome to Wonderful Things. Psalm 119:18 says, "Open my eyes that I may see wonderful things in your law." I'm Reverend Brian Campbell, and these are my notes on the Bible. Join me in my search for the wonderful things in God's Word. Please watch this video all the way to the end. Leave a comment to tell me what you like and don't like. If you've not subscribed to this channel, do that down below and ring the bell for the alerts. Don't forget to click the thumbs up button to tell me that you like this video. And now for the lesson. Romans chapter 2. Now you, if you call yourself a Jew, if you rely on the law and boast in God, if you know His will and approve of what is superior because you were instructed by the law, if you are convinced that you are a guide for the blind, a light for those who are in the dark, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of little children, because you have in the law the embodiment of knowledge and truth, you then, who teach others, do you not teach yourself? You who preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that people should not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law, do you dishonor God by breaking the law? As it is written, God's name is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. Circumcision has value if you observe the law, but if you break the law, you have become as though you had not been circumcised. So then, if those who are not circumcised keep the law's requirements, will they not be regarded as though they were circumcised? The one who is not circumcised physically and yet obeys the law will condemn you who, even though you have the written code and circumcision, are a lawbreaker. A person is not a Jew who is one only outwardly, nor is circumcision merely outward and physical. No, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is circumcision of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the written code. Such a person's praise is not from other people, but from God. The Jews named themselves Jews. They depended upon the law. They boasted in God. They know the will. They test the quality of things because they're instructed out of the law. They're persuaded that they themselves are guides to the blind, light to darkness, instructors of the stupid, teachers of children, having the embodiment of knowledge and truth in the law. They teach others. They preach about do not steal, do not commit adultery, turn away from idolatry. They boast because of the law. They boast in their circumcision. A lot of things. It's a pretty comprehensive description. Paul is going to begin to pick that apart using the very root of their argument. Circumcision. The very first verb given in verse 17 literally means to name something based upon something. So the first phrase could mean something like, if you are one who bases his name on his Jewishness. It was common among the Jews to refer to themselves as children of Abraham, as in Luke 3:8. From the very beginning of this section, Paul is including all the Jews in what follows. So Paul asks if they depend upon the law. The Jew held the Torah as his only hope of salvation. He truly depended upon the law. The Jews whom Paul addresses were proud of their God. You can look at Jeremiah 9:24, or Micah 3:11, or Micah 7:18. They like to boast in the power of their God as compared to the powerlessness of other gods. They forgot, however, the character of God as a righteous judge. In verse 18, the first phrase simply is, know the will. Given that Paul has only just mentioned the Jewish pride in their God, it can only be God's will he is referring to. Besides, from his own conversion, Paul has not concerned himself with any other will but God's, including his own. The really observant Jews examine everything through the lens of the Torah. A thing is either kosher or not, clean or unclean. The rabbis taught that Jews were guides to the blind. They saw the rest of the world as spiritually blind, and themselves as the spiritually sighted. Paul may be thinking of Jesus' description of the Pharisees as blind guides in Matthew 15:14. The Gospel of Matthew was probably circulating by this point as the first of the Gospels to be written. The Jews saw the Gentiles with some justification as living in darkness. They saw themselves as the only light in the world. Paul points out in verse 20 that the Jews considered themselves instructors of the stupid, is how I've translated it. He uses a word there that means unintelligent. Considering spiritual things, the Jews considered the Gentiles to be too dumb to understand God as revealed by Moses. The Jews, Paul says, also prided themselves on their teaching of children. Based in the synagogue system, the rabbis taught nearly every boy to read the Torah. Indeed, training a boy in the Torah was one of a father's primary duties, and failure meant public disgrace. So some of the Jews' claims are valid. The very fact, however, that they claim these things becomes evidence against them. Starting with verse 21, Paul switches to a series of accusing questions. The first question sets the stage for everything that follows. It is shameful that those who claim to be instructors and teachers seem not to have learned the true lesson of the Torah and the prophets. The righteous will live by faith, Habakkuk 2:4. The Lord wants justice and mercy among his people, not the sacrifice of bulls and lambs, 1 Samuel 15:22-23. These things Paul has written about should have been obvious to the Jewish rabbis. In the second question, the word steal becomes the first part of our word kleptomania, or the irrational compulsion to steal. The word refers to a thief who steals by sneaking around. The principle is one of dishonesty in general. We always come down hard on the dishonesty of others, but find ways to excuse our own dishonesty. Romans 2 verse 22 mentions the sin of adultery. The ancient world was rife with adultery. There were many different socioeconomic factors going on. There was male and female temple prostitution. There was economic prostitution, as we have nowadays. There was sexual use of slavery. It was not what we would consider a sexually moral time period. Moses, of course, condemned adultery. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Jesus condemned just the fantasy, not just the act. He condemned the mental aspect of it. And Paul's readers probably had the Gospel of Matthew, or at least some of them did, and so they may have been aware of this. The Jews also forbid idolatry. Their primary statement is the Shema. Hear, Shema, Israel. The Lord our God is one Lord. The Jews very correctly condemned idolatry. They could, however, rob temples or profit from idolatry in two ways, both of which were normally acknowledged by the religious leaders as sin. First, a Jewish craftsman could make an idol or something used in idol worship and sell it to an idol worshiper. Second, they could literally steal money or valuables from a temple. In Acts 19:37, the town clerk at Ephesus seems to feel that someone could literally rob a temple, and says that Paul and his friends have not done so. Paul may also mean that withholding that which is due to God, such as your tithe, is a form of robbing the temple of God. If so, the meaning is not necessarily monetary, but social, emotional, and intellectual. Do we rob temples? Do we rob God? When we transgress or overstep the boundaries of the law, we dishonor the one who wrote the law. Leon Morris says it is one thing to have the law and quite another to keep it. Paul says that for the name of God is blasphemed among the nations because of you, just as it is written. So where is it written? Most scholars put that as coming from either Isaiah 42:5 or from Ezekiel 36:20 and 23. It doesn't appear to be a direct quotation. Paul is thinking about the message of the prophets. If God's people, given the Torah, the law, Sinai, will not follow that law, then they have blasphemed the lawgiver, God. Paul mostly condemns them, not for violating the letter of the law, but for violating the intent and the principle of the law. Most Christians are aware of the principles of Christianity, and I think sometimes we also fail to follow Christ's teachings in our heart. The external things are often easier than the internal. Jesus spoke of this in Luke 11:39-52. So notice verse 42 in Luke 11. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God 1/10 of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. What do we 21st century Christians, what do you personally neglect? The Jews saw circumcision as the central point of their faith, and Paul would not deny the benefit of circumcision to someone who is obeying the covenant. Any student of the Torah and the prophets should understand that overstepping the boundaries of the law of Moses negates every benefit of the outward sign of the covenant. But those who choose a life outside of its provisions cannot claim the blessings of the covenant. Substitute baptism for circumcision, and every Christian should take warning. Baptism is only an outward symbol and will not get one into heaven. The same for church membership, singing in the choir, paying tithes, or even teaching Sunday school. Our works do not bring or guarantee salvation. When Gentiles, or the unchurched, follow righteousness, keeping the heart of the law without the outward sign of it, God sees them as keeping the covenant. The important consideration here is that the Jewish people stand condemned in Paul's view because they transgress the Torah. The uncircumcised who obeys the intent of the law condemns in doing that the circumcised who violates the same law. Jewishness, Paul says, is an inward condition resulting from personal choice. The real circumcision is the alteration God makes in our heart and spirit. The Pharisees are often shown in the Gospels as seeking the praise and admiration of men. Many of Jesus' teachings use them as an example of what not to do. Paul concludes this section by reminding us to seek the praise we need from the one true God. I think we need to understand our faith is not one of outward sign, but one of outward action that springs from an inward change. The heart changes, the actions follow. Has your heart changed? If it has, then your actions will follow. If your heart has not changed, then maybe that needs to be a matter of prayer. Thank you for joining me for Wonderful Things. Please leave a comment down below to tell me what you liked or did not like about this video. Tell me what I need to change or what I ought to keep doing. Click the thumbs up button down below or subscribe if you haven't already. When you like or subscribe, these are votes for YouTube to recommend this channel to others. Tell others about this channel, because previous Facebook recommendations nearly doubled the views for earlier videos. Finally, please pray for me as I work on the next video. I'm Reverend Brian Campbell. May God richly bless you.